A father in the 1960s and his son at the turn of the century communicate through time via radio, altering the course of events for better and worse. To further spice things up, there's also a serial killer to catch. Adjust those dials and tune in as we discuss Frequency. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
Or Chief, as he's going to be referred to as this in this episode.
Absolutely.
Welcome everyone to Science Fiction Movie Podcast. We get together, we talk about sci-fi movie we watched. This episode was actually a vote winner over on our Patreon, and there was it 3 time travel-y movies? I think
Yes.
it was.
Mm-hmm.
And the winner was Frequency, which is more about communicating through time than it is about the actual traveling through time.
Yeah, it's there's a very obvious parallel to make with something we've already done on this show, but it's a little spoilery, so I'll wait until we get a bit deeper to make it.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a spoiler to say that The Call has a base similar premise.
Mm-hmm.
It goes in a very different direction with it, but it starts off with a base sort of same idea. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we'll probably do some comparisons to that a little bit later once we're into the spoilers. I mean, we won't spoil that movie because we're not talking about that movie. But yeah. So anyway, yeah, we'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into the spoilers, and we will what are you writing?
Sorry, nothing. I'm fidgeting with stuff underneath. I'll be quiet.
Yes. David's got into the hole. He's in trouble.
Seems like that's happening more and more frequently recently.
I'm trying to remember my intro blur, but I thought I heard like writing. I'm like, were you taking notes all of a sudden? What's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I just keep writing Pete is a big stupid head on this piece of paper over and over again.
I bet.
Mm-hmm.
So yes. And of course you can get bonus shows over on our Patreon. I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode though. So yeah, Frequency won the vote and beat out the other movies and is... I've not seen this before, but I did see the pilot for the TV show that was loosely based on it. That was around like 2018-ish. So
2016, yeah.
Yeah. So I saw that, and that's like I saw the pilot of that. Although they changed some things in that, it was like a daughter was the main character in the TV show, so they did shake some things up a little bit. But it didn't really. I mean, one, I don't barely remember any of it anyway. But I don't think it really spoiled anything that this movie did. It was just kind of like, here's the same broad premise, and we're going to like make it a long form thing, rather than something that's all wrapped up by the end of a 2-hour story. So
I could easily see how this would translate to a television procedural kind of show. It has that sort of easy adaptability to it.
So yeah, I mean, we'll get into things, but Dennis Quaid plays Frank, who is in 1969. And then his son in 1999, basically present day. This movie came out in 2000, but the present day part set in 99, and that's played by Jim Caviezel. And they can communicate over a ham radio, assisted by the Northern Lights, which is magically making them communicate over space and time.
You know, I kind of appreciate the fact that they go into a little bit of like, here's the reason why it's so special, and also why it's not a permanent feature, like it's temporary at best. But at the same time, it's magic. You're just making magic.
Yeah.
You could just say whatever.
It's just magic. It's really just, hey, don't worry about it. Let's just have fun with what it actually does, and then go from there. But really, did you need some sort of reason? Could you not have just had it accidentally happen and then wonder why the hell is this happening? And you could just write it off as because fate needs you to fix things, so fate has made sure this has happened, and
absolutely
that would almost be less random than what they give us in this movie.
I'll get into it deeper, but this movie, I almost came to complete terms with their method of how the timeline works. But every once in a while, they throw me a curveball. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm hoping maybe you can help me with that. But it's so close to working perfectly.
I mean, we'll find out, I suppose, when we get into the full spoilers. But we'll start off with basic impressions, per usual. David, what did you think of Frequency?
I like the concept of it and most of where the movie goes with it. I think that there is, there's an interesting way that they play with this where because the father is a firefighter, the son is a cop, there is this basically what the storyline evolves into at a certain point is kind of a race against the clock in the past to solve this crime, which I like. I think that's a great concept. They play it very well here. Where it falls down for me is every, I would say, 30 minutes or so, it takes a strange direction into this very, I don't want to say like bittersweet, but like it's very emotional. It's very like it's trying to play on the emotions of all this like father-son stuff, and they really try to ham that up. And the first time I was okay with it because it's a big moment for them. They're talking to each other. But as it progressed throughout the movie, and especially by the time we hit the final scene of this movie, I was done with it. I was so bored with the like emotional subplot of this movie that it just kind of it completely ruined a lot of the goodwill that had built up as we were leaving it. Cast wise, this cast is strangely stacked. Like it's not A-listers, but like so many people are recognizable in this.
Leave it for now. I've got a lot to say about the cast of this for one reason or another. This movie is, I mean, it's such a year 2000 movie. Everything about it. The sappy parts you're complaining about, which I agree with for the record.
Sappy, that's the word I was looking at. Yeah.
But I agree with that. But the way it handles the sappy is so year 2000 that it's like, it's almost sickening how of its time it is in some ways. I think the movie is... It's got a good concept, and there's a reason why other things have, it's literally a TV show based on this was greenlit, why other sci-fi movies have done similar premise. And to be honest, I'm not even convinced this is the first story with this concept.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I'm not convinced of it at all. So the premise is good, though, right? And there's some good ideas sprinkled throughout. But I think the movie has a lot of problems. I think one of the problems is its structure is kind of weird at times. And what I mean by that is that by the time you get to, there's like a murder case to solve, right? And I won't go into it any more than that here. Like we have to spend so much time in the movie just like having characters come to terms that this is even a thing, and that's like almost the entire first half. That while there's a couple of little mentions of something in the first half, it feels so separate from the rest of the movie. It feels like it takes like a turn, or it takes like a. It really feels like a movie of sections where they don't like merge up together quite as neatly as they should in a really well written script. They should feel like they're always part of the same world, the same story kind of thing. So that was frustrating to me. I think that there's a problem at points where there's like a big chunk of the third act where we basically just ignore one side of the time split. Because it basically there's nothing that can be done in that side, so it's like, I guess that part's just not in the movie for a long time now because everything has to happen on the other side. So that was a little bit frustrating. And then I agree with the sappiness. It feels like super, like the most like mainstream Hollywoodized version of this concept. Like it feels put through that. And there's some really kind of things they go for at the end that it feels like, they thought of this moment and they were so in love with it that it doesn't matter if it really works with everything else they've done for the rest of the movie. They're going to have it happen because they like the idea so much. And by the end, I was feeling pretty lukewarm. There was moments throughout the movie where I thought it was perfectly fine, if not really capturing my heart or anything. But by the time it got to the end, I was like, I don't know. And right before we started this review, David heard me say what the F, and he said, what is it? And I said, I'll tell you in the review. Because what I was saying what the F at was this movie's rating on IMDb. It has a 7.4, which is very high on IMDb, and I do not know why. It's not that good. It's kind of mediocre, honestly, all in.
That strikes me as people remember this playing on TV a lot growing up, and they just have this strange nostalgia for it. It doesn't strike me as actual quality. 7.4 is higher than like legitimately great movies on IMDb.
That is strange. And maybe it's just all down to the concept and like a pretty interesting cast list, and mixed with the nostalgia, and you've got something where a lot of people at a certain age. Actually, David, I want to say something that's going to like just this sort of upset me.
Oh, we doing this? We doing this today?
It upset me when I realized something watching this. So this whole movie's premise is that, okay, 30 years, which is the same time gap in Back to the Future, actually, right? And it's the perfect time gap because it's 30 years is basically a generation where you're kids to parents kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? So 1999 is the present day part of this story, and the backstory is 1969. And I had the dawn of a realization at one point in this movie that how close we are to 1999 being 30 years ago. It's very close.
Yeah. I don't like to think about that.
I think it was when we found out the main character grown up in the future is 36, and I went, wait a minute, I'm 35. This is very distressing that I'm basically the same age as this guy, and the backstory's in the 60s. What is happening?
God. It's just one of those things where I think I've made this comparison before, but in Shakespeare, when you're performing plays and stuff like that, you at a certain age you can be cast as like Romeo, you can be cast as whatever else, but as you make your way through, eventually everybody just moves towards King Lear, who's just the oldest guy in any Shakespeare play. And like that's kind of how I feel. It's like, yeah, I'm out of the Romeo era, I'm maybe in like the Macbeth era now, but King Lear is staring me down.
It's just, I don't know, like every generation probably feels this, but the difference from the 60s to the 90s feels gargantuan to me.
Oh, yeah.
And the difference from the 90s to now, like, there's obviously some differences, but, like, I have to assume people who are, like, 12 right now think there's a huge difference.
Yeah, well, there's a montage in this where, we'll get to it, but he's breaking all of the rules of time travel, mind you, and he's explaining stuff in the future to his dad, and they just, like, blink and you'll miss it. They have him just be like, oh, yeah, cell phones are a thing. Like, they work off satellites or whatever. And I'm just like, it's weird, because clearly that's a huge jump there. But everything else he's talking about is like, yeah, that seems pretty modern. Like, it doesn't feel like there is this massive shift in technology.
Yeah, I guess that's the other thing that I should mention here as a critique, is that I don't... Like, half this movie takes place in 1969, and I feel like a lot of that, I wouldn't have noticed it was in a different time period.
Yeah.
Right? It feels very, very laid back in terms of, like, the fire trucks look a bit different when you see them, I guess. Like, there's a few, like, more people are smoking, I guess, but it's really not, like, that much of a, like...
It's really just built up over the fact it had to be 1969 because they really wanted to tie the World Series for that year into the plot.
Yes.
And, like, that was all absolutely factual. Here's what actually happened in that World Series. But when it comes down to how people talk to each other, how people act around each other, it could have been any time.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that's a misstep here, but they should have had a more of a distinct visual to differentiate it. So I think that's a critique I'd have. To get to the cast, though, so there's a weird thing here with the cast, right? I want to point out. Yes. Right, so you've got Dennis Quaid, and you've got Jim Caviezel. Jim Caviezel, I mainly know from Person of Interest. Obviously, his most famous thing is probably Passion of the Christ, but if you watch Person of Interest for 5 seasons, you probably think of that first when you think of him. And then Dennis Quaid, both of whom have got their own personal like baggage / demons that like make them weird. Like Caviezel more so, but Quaid's like pretty right wing, I think. I'll just say that and move on.
Oh yeah.
Right. But so Elizabeth Mitchell's in this movie, right? Who we saw in Collector's Cut back in the Santa Claus sequels, but of course I know her mainly from Lost, right? And this is, a few years before that show started, and she showed up a few seasons in, whatever. So she's in here, and I'm like, oh, hey, it's her from Lost. And then halfway through the movie, I won't give too much context for this, but a character's name turns out to be Jack Shepherd.
Yeah.
What the hell?
So I don't want to harp on it too long because I really don't know the facts about it, but a brief glimpse at the IMDb trivia section. Apparently, the Lost thing is brought up of like, there's a lot of weird coincidences between this and Lost. But strangely enough, the other side of that is there's a lot of strange coincidences between this movie and 9/11. Where like a bunch of the numbers used. So the ones I saw was the house number that they keep coming back to is 343, which I believe is one of the flight numbers, if I'm remembering correctly, that was involved in 9/11. And then at one point there is a fire engine that also says 93 on it, which is a different one of the flight numbers.
Oh yeah, 1993. I remember the movie.
Yeah. So it's weird. There's a couple coincidences to that, but I don't know enough about it in depth to speak intelligently on it. But
sure.
Yeah, this movie does have a bunch of weird coincidences with a bunch of stuff.
If you even can speak intelligently on it, because it is just a coincidence, but
yeah.
This was not a rabbit hole I was expecting to go down. But I definitely noticed that it was like I noticed the name Jack Shepherd, and then went, wait a minute, Juliet's here as well. What's going on? This double lost things.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. So Andre Braugher's in this as well, playing a cop, in New York.
He's like playing the chief too. Like he's 100%. I'm like, that's Holt. You just made Holt again.
Yeah. Well, they made Holt before Holt. I think is what you mean to say. That said, though, he was famous for being a cop in Homicide: Life in the Street long before this, even. So.
Oh, that's true.
So yeah, so he's basically built a career out of doing that. But so he's there, and he's a character that's in both parts of the timeline. And that's maybe one of the things you have to kind of swallow a little bit, is like buying that he's 30 years older with the makeup they've put on him. It's a little bit of a tough sell.
It's especially hard because I know what he looked like 30 years older, or nearly 30 years older. So like, I'm like, you're not quite there. You're close, but you're not quite there. Meanwhile, they did Elizabeth Mitchell dirty with how they aged her up.
Yeah, I guess.
I'm just saying, she in the modern timeline, she is like not at all what she looks like nowadays.
Oh, for sure. Oh, that's what you meant. I thought you meant the makeup was bad.
No.
Yeah. Noah Emmerich's in this, who you might know as... So he's the best friend / neighbor of the main character in this. And he's the best friend of Truman in The Truman Show.
It's like this movie. You know those video games where it's like the fighting games and they take all the different... like from the various different things, your Smash Brothers and your whatever else is. Mm-hmm. This feels like that for movies. Like, okay, we got Brooklyn Nine-Nine cop.
Well,
we got Best Friend from Truman Show.
I mean, I'd say more TV shows, because you've got Jim Caviezel from Person of Interest. You've got Elizabeth Mitchell from Lost. You've got Andre Braugher from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Sean Doyle's an important character as well later in the movie. Yes. And he's from The Expanse. So you've got a whole entourage here. I guess Noah Emmerich's the one that sticks out for being from a movie rather than a TV show, but and then
it's more so for me that those three people play like the exact role that they played before.
That's true, yeah. And then one more thing to throw in here is Michael Cera.
I was trying my best to not look that up because he popped up on screen for like a quarter second. I'm like, was that Michael Cera? Is that baby Michael Cera in this movie? And I had to go off and check, and yes, it was. But like,
and to continue this theme from Arrested Development,
yes.
Which I know that sounds silly because obviously all actors have been in other things, but this is just like a weird combination of like a bunch of people from other TV shows that are more known for other things. So yeah, I don't know. We saw Dennis Quaid in Inner Space though, so he'll always be the Inner Space dude to me. So that's fine.
Yeah, that's fair. Only other person not even worth mentioning for their point in the movie, but just because they are somewhat of a name, is Jordan Bridges, who is Jeff Bridges' nephew, I believe.
Oh, right, okay. I was going to say, who the hell is that? What are you talking about?
Yeah. He's just barely in this movie, but he is there.
He looks a little bit like BJ Novak. That's now I'm looking at his face.
Yeah, well, BJ Novak's got something to answer for, I guess.
I'm getting BJ Novak vibes from this guy.
Mm-hmm.
I've only seen one white man before. He's BJ Novak. So the second white man I see, he's giving me some serious BJ Novak vibes.
Yep.
I hope that meme lasts and that joke will always work, because I feel like it might not age well otherwise.
Whatever.
I'll
just be sure to bookmark this episode, bring it back every 5 years.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Getting some major Boss Baby vibes from this movie. Anyway, so yeah, wildly like recognizable cast if you've watched a bunch of these TV shows that we've mentioned, which is a little interesting. That said, though, I don't think it necessarily improves the movie per se. I mean, obviously, a lot of them are good performers, and that's good, but It didn't do much to sort of lift the movie up for me and sort of bring it out of that like Hollywood sheen of like, because as much as this is a sci-fi movie, it definitely feels like a year 2000 thriller in the way it handles a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the writer Toby Emmerich, who I think is the brother of Noah Emmerich.
Oh, really?
And
okay.
like, yeah, he's done a bunch of executive producer stuff recently. He didn't have a lot of writing credits under his belt. He was just based on the motion picture for Frequency, and then also The Last Mimsy, which I couldn't tell you what the hell that's about.
Yeah.
But what gets me is that he was a producer on The Butterfly Effect, which was also another one of those early 2000s time travel in a weird way sort of thing.
More notably, it was another movie that was in the vote of this one.
Yes, exactly.
These connections are all running very deep. We got the writers related to one of the actors. Does Michael Cera even look like Noah Emmerich now? I don't think he does, but
probably not. No.
So because he plays the young version of him, just for anyone who's following along. Gregory Hoblit, the director.
Yes.
Never heard of him. And when I looked him up,
Nope.
He's done a bunch of episodes of NYPD Blue, which does make some sense. He directed Primal Fear in '96. Now, I've never seen Primal Fear, but I'm not surprised the director of this did Primal Fear. Take that for whatever you want to take that as, because I've not seen it.
Right.
But for some reason, I'm like, yeah, that's some Primal Fear vibes coming off of this. Having never
I don't
seen
really know
Primal
what
Fear.
vibes Primal Fear gives, but all right.
I don't know, generic Hollywood thriller, I guess is what I'm saying.
Oh, well, yeah, that strikes me as accurate for sure.
Yeah. So there's that. He did a movie called Fracture. He did Fallen. Have I seen Fallen? Is that the Denzel Washington movie?
Yep. Denzel Washington
okay.
Junga, then.
I've seen that one then. Okay.
Okay.
I've seen one of his movies. It was just okay.
He's got a real thing for homicide. Like all of his, not even just like the act of homicide, but detectives and the police force surrounding homicide.
Like he sticks to his shtick. Although he did do a sci-fi movie called NYPD 2069 once.
I bet it's following the homicide department in 2069.
It probably is, but this should be like cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Giancarlo Esposito's in it.
Is it any good?
I mean, it's got a 6.6 on IMDb, but this movie's got a 7.4.
Yeah, it means nothing.
And that is completely called into question the people rating on IMDb, to be honest. Yeah, so it's pretty mediocre as well.
Yeah. It looks like it.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, so back to Frequency. Despite all the good ideas that obviously this premise kind of can lead to, and they do some stuff with some of it, I don't think it ever is like quite like, you know, given the movie talks about baseball a lot, I'll use this. It never quite hits a home run. It never quite completely captures me and makes me go, oh, that's cool. I was constantly going, yeah, this is a very Hollywood way of doing this moment. This is a very Hollywood way of doing this idea. So, I mean, needless to say, I think The Call was much better if I'm comparing the two. But
yeah. Even with the tone differences, even with the difference in genre, by the time you hit the end of it, I think that this movie just feels like it's so much more focused on like you said, they got an idea into their head and they just kind of worked the script to get to that moment rather than running the concept as far as it logically can go. Like they had the concept and that was built for these moments rather than the reverse.
Which is perfectly fine, and a lot of scripts are written that way, and sometimes that's the right way to do it. You know what your ending's supposed to mean, what's important about it, and then you build a story that goes to it. But a good writing would do it in a way that it feels like it's the natural conclusion to everything that came before it. And this, I mean, it feels natural in the sense that I kind of was like, yeah, this is of course this is how they're going to end this movie. Like I know that's what they want to do, so it wasn't surprising in that sense. But it's like, is it the right ending for the movie though?
Yeah, there's a difference between natural and predictable. Yes. And I think this movie's predictable with where it ends up, but ultimately it still kind of feels unnatural as to how we get there.
Yeah, generic ass music as well, just to throw that in here.
God. Again, like, I think for the most part of this movie, it's score. Like, there's not that much to it, but they make the strange ass decision to end this movie with a song, like one that is nominated for Best Original Song at the Golden Globes. And God, I hated that. It just took me completely out of the movie.
Yeah, the final like 2 minutes of just kind of sickening, to be honest. Sickening. So we'll get to that. I think it's probably just time to jump into spoilers then, because I feel like there's a lot of plot to actually explain with this one, because it does do a lot of evolving as it goes.
Yeah, I do want to just comment real quick on the special effects. For the most part, they're okay. A lot of stuff is done with just like in camera, like they make stuff look blurry and stuff like that. Specifically when timelines are shifting on each other, there's this kind of blurry effect that they do to it. It's not bad. It's not how I would do it, but ultimately it's just a stylistic choice. My main problem comes from the special effects outside those moments, specifically in the very opening scene. They show a fire rescue down in a sewer, and they do this whole thing where a bunch of gasoline catches on fire and a fireball comes out through a manhole. And it is the worst fire effect in this movie by far, but it is so early on in the movie, it just left a bad taste in my mouth the whole time.
Yeah, there's nothing, cause that looked really bad, but there's nothing kind of as bad as that remotely. Right. Not that there's a ton of fire stuff. There's like one big fire sequence in the middle, but yeah, no, that's fair. All right, so spoilers for frequency. You have been warned. We'll get into things. So here's so I don't know if we're gonna go through in order, to be honest, in this one, because it's kind of obviously got I mean, maybe for some of it, but I want to kind of just like my broad complaint about the structure here first.
Okay.
Because my big problem, and I felt this in the pacing, is that, you know, for the first like 45, 50 minutes, something to that effect, almost half the movie, we spend all that time with we've started talking on the radio, we don't realize who each other is, but then of course Jim Caviezel in present day kind of like hears one or two things to kind of make him realize, and he tries to prove it to his dad, and his dad doesn't believe him. And the recurring thing throughout this movie that kind of keeps helping prove things is that he's really good with baseball history, and he like tells him, oh, this is what's going to happen in this inning, and then this will happen, and it'll be these really hard to predict things that are right exactly 100%, and it kind of proves some stuff, so on and so on. And it's like, okay, all right, so that's this thing's up. But we spend a long time doing that, and when he finally kind of tries to tell his dad who he is in the future, he doesn't really believe it, and he tries to warn him, because by this point we've learned thoroughly that his dad's going to die in a firefighting incident, and it's coming up, like it's like tomorrow by the time they're having this conversation.
Cutting it a little bit close there.
So we go a whole big set piece, and you know that because he's got this, he said this to him, and he literally boils it down to, you had a choice at one point, you had a branching path, and you chose left, and if you'd only chosen right, you would have made it. So, of course, when that moment comes in the fire, Dennis Quaid's like, oh, everything's coming true. I'm going to go the opposite way of what I would have done. And he survives. And it changes the timeline. And by this point, we are almost halfway into the movie. Maybe even we are halfway into the movie at that point. But I definitely remember looking at the time, it had been like 45 minutes, and I was thinking, man, we've not even started what the rest of this movie is going to be about yet, right?
Yeah.
You know, because
it's around the 45-minute mark, but this is a 2-hour movie, so it's just shy.
So there's like a thing early on in the radio where you hear about a nightingale killer, right? And then like they find a dead body, like an old dead body, like in the ground in present day, somewhere in the opening act, whatever. And it's like, okay, that's it. That's your two things you get. And it's not until after the entire timeline has been changed that all of a sudden we have to actually start treating this killer, the serial killer, as a major concern that's important to the movie. And I felt that transition was sharp, and it didn't really feel all that natural. I really think they should have been hammering home about this Nightingale killer a lot more in the first chunk.
I see what you're saying, and I do agree to some extent, but I don't think that's the fix. I'm not sure what I think the fix is, but I do agree that there is
it may not
there
be
is a sharp turn to it.
No, I fair enough. Like, I'm offering a fix. I don't know if it's the right one. I'm not the paid writer, but but I can tell you that something feels off with the way it's just not really that much of a concern, and then all of a sudden everything in the movie's hinging on it. It's really kind of a weird pivot at a certain point, and it makes it feel like everything up until we really start to get to that makes it feel like the movie's not started yet. We have to spend 50 minutes just setting up the concept of the movie so the plot can actually start. And that feeling is not nice. It feels like we're taking a long time to get going.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of, again, without spoiling the call, that's kind of where I like that one a little bit more, because they make it very clear that it is, I don't want to say opposite motivations of the characters, but they both want very conflicting things. And as such, when one happens, it causes the other one to not happen. And therefore, they're battling it out all the way to the end of the movie. This one, because this serial killer thing is completely hinging on the fact that the timeline changes for it to become a part of their story, there's no battling it out anymore. It'd be one thing if, like, oh, as long as you're alive, Dad, the serial killer thing is going to be a problem. We need to reset the timeline where I'm going to have to give you up again. No, it's how do we make it so both can happen? Let's make both happen. I like that idea.
Yeah, I like what you said there, is that this killer can't really become, and not obviously it's a problem that he's killing people, right? And they had 3 victims, and for whatever reason they stopped. And it's quite clear why they stopped once we get to the pivot point. Right. But that part there, it doesn't become a concern to the main characters and what's going on in their lives until after the timeline change. And because of that, he can't feel like a big deal until then. And that makes it feel like such a weird shift. So, yeah, because the whole thing is this killer's targeting nurses. And would you believe it, Jim Caviezel's mum, Elizabeth Mitchell, is a nurse. Which, by the way, what a family. Mother's a nurse, father's a firefighter, and son's a cop. It's like, hey, every single like genre of crappy TV show is represented in this family. All we need is a lawyer, like cousin, and we're set.
You have the entire NBC evening lineup. My God.
But yeah, so the whole thing is that once the timeline has been like changed because Dennis Quaid's alive, the little change that happens, because we see it happen, is that he goes to see his wife at the hospital where she's working her shift, and because he shows up and she's still working, well, to be fair, so the way it plays out in the scene, it's like his interference and talking to her causes it, but we find out later that in actual fact, it's like the fact that she's there at all is the problem, because originally, because he died in a fire, she was pulled out of work to go and do stuff with her son because her husband just died. But while she's there, she catches a doctor making a mistake where he's about to accidentally kill a patient with the things he's given him. But it just so happens that this patient is the Nightingale killer. So in the original timeline, he was accidentally murdered by a doctor, which is actually really funny when you stop and think about it.
Oh, yeah. I love that concept, because they keep on saying in the original timeline, it's like, yeah, we never found him. He just did 3 murders and then he disappeared. And then we all know, like, nah, man, he just had a shitty doctor. That's it. That's the only reason.
It makes me wonder, not so much the doctor part specifically, but how many people who were starting to be serial killers, maybe had a couple of victims, and then just like accidentally fell off a bridge and died. So we never solved it because they never kept killing anyone.
Right. Yeah, probably. Honestly.
I wonder how many, because you hear about the big ones that survived and had tons of victims, but what about the ones who just like fell off a cliff?
Yeah. The guy who gets 3 kills, so he's labeled as a serial killer, and then whoopsie daisy, drunk driver, done. And then all of a sudden we get a Netflix documentary 30 years down the road, like, this man escaped into the dust. We never knew what happened to him.
He fell into a pool of his own vomit and drowned. That's what happened. Yep.
That's you know what? We should end every Netflix documentary about those serial killers like that. Just like, here's the most likely answer.
Yeah, because the dark truth is that in order to catch a serial killer, sometimes you need another victim or 2 to get more clues. That's the really dark element of it.
Gotta wait for him to mess up.
Yeah. So, like, all right, so it's an interesting idea, of course, like helping someone in the past solve a murder. And of course, the ripple of this is that because she saved him, it made the Nightingale killer notice her, and that starts off the idea that he's picked her as a victim. So... right after we go through the part of the movie where Jim Caviezel explains to his dad, this is weird, like I kind of remember 2 timelines now. Like I remember like you not being here, but now I kind of remember you being there and being at my police graduation and whatever else has happened in my last.
All right, so can we just pause for a second and talk about the method of time shift and how their version of time travels work?
Okay, just one detail, just so I don't forget it. After the timeline is changed, Dennis Quaid is still dead in the present day, but he died only about 10 years ago due to cancer because he's constantly smoking, and they bring that up. So just I want to mention that now because it's going to be important later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, on you go.
So the way that the time travel seemingly works is that you've got a point A and a point B, and they're separated by exactly 30 years, which also simultaneously have an aurora borealis over New York, just as the magical MacGuffin of here's what makes time travel possible.
Actually, genuine question. Does New York ever get the Northern Lights?
Not usually.
Not
No.
usually? No. Okay.
I mean, it's hard to say because New York is the definition of light pollution, where you can't see anything outside anyway. So,
I mean, is the movie suggesting then that if you go further north to where there's always Northern Lights on a regular basis, that you can always communicate with the past?
no, that's a good question that is not answered here. Yeah, no, I mean, I'd assume so. I think that whoever wrote this movie severely misunderstood the idea of time zones as you head further up, where everything's a lot closer.
That's the other thing, speaking of New York, is that it really stuck out with Jim Caviezel because I'm used to him speaking in Person of Interest, but everyone's rocking like the New York accent in this, and really laying it on thick. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
It's so you can immediately make those father-son connections.
Yes.
But yeah, so you've got a point A and a point B in the timeline separated by exactly 30 years. And the way that the time shift works is that in the present, nothing changes until it gets past that window in the point A, in the past. So we see the initial thing is when he's talking about, oh, wait a minute, you're my dad, blah, blah, blah. Dennis Quaid drops a cigarette onto his desk, and then in real time, he sees the cigarette scorch mark form on the desk, and he can recognize it wasn't just there, and it is there now. So immediately, my problem with the time travel is, okay, he has the memory of the two timelines. Why is it just him? And I get that he's the one who's interacting with the ham radio and all that, but like, why is he the only one who has memories of both timelines when everyone else theoretically has also lived through both of them?
It's a good point because he's not a time traveler like Marty and Doc, where he's unique because he's the one traveling through things. In theory, he should just be as oblivious to what time used to be compared to everyone else. I think this is just something you have to accept or the movie doesn't work, because as soon as the timeline changed, he shouldn't know to go back to the radio and talk to his dad anymore, and that would make everything fall apart. So he knows
exactly.
both.
And then that leads me into the second problem when you're saying he wouldn't go back to the radio, is that they do this thing, and it's much more apparent at the finale of the movie, but they do it constantly throughout, where the times have changed. The history up to this point has changed, but everyone is still pretty much in the same place. Like, the world shifts around him slightly, but like the first time the timeline shifts, he's out to the bar with two of his friends, and then this time around, he's still out to the bar with two of his friends in the exact same place.
I accepted it in that one because I think, to me, the point of that is because that's when his dad's like changing the past by living instead of dying. And the idea that he brings up his dad and these two people are there, his friends are there to confirm what's changed. So I from a script perspective, I understood it's like, no, they're still going to be there because they're going to be able to just quickly answer a question that'll make him go, wait, things have changed. Yeah. Right? I get it. It bothered me way more at the end of the movie and the climax than it did at any other point, because like a character's still there in present day where I'm like, would he still have come here after everything else that's already changed? I don't think so.
Nah, not at all. And then there's one point somewhere in the middle here, and it's right when the pivot of, oh, now there's this murderer thing happens. And maybe I just wasn't keeping up with it, but we see that after he talks to his dad, and his dad was still alive, he calls up his mom, and he gets her voicemail. And it's definitely her voice on the other end of the line. And he's like, hey, just call me back. Like, we need to talk. A whole bunch of stuff has happened. And then we get the scene where Dennis Quaid is visiting in the hospital. We see that the serial killer was saved. And then in the present day, when he tries to call the number again the next day, it goes to the deli. Now, on one hand, I understand that in the past, the timeline has changed, the serial killer's alive, therefore all of those murders happened. But it also doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and maybe this is just me as like a determinist, where I think that the moment that the timeline shifts, as long as you don't keep on interacting with it, like it's stuck down a path. Like, it doesn't then change again later on, but why was he able to get to his mother's voicemail in the first place?
Oh, okay, that's not what I thought you were going to say. I think, based on your question there, I think that makes sense because, as we see in the past, things change when they occur, right? So it's very much, burn on the table, burn appears in present day. It's writing on the table, we see that, the next time when he goes back to the radio, he's literally writing on the desk, I am still here, and he sees it being written in the present day. So it's very much like a tether between the two time periods, right? So the idea that it's only when the killer notices her at the hospital, right? Because notably, that scene happens after the phone call where he gets the voice message. That's after that, in the past, when Jack Quaid goes to see his wife, and the killer catches her and sees her and goes, oh, I'm going to make her my next victim. So it does make some sense to me that nothing changes until that point. However, what doesn't make sense to me is that technically it shouldn't change until he's killed her.
Right. Yeah.
That's my problem
kind of
here.
What I'm getting at.
Yes. It's not so much that why did he get the voicemail in the first place. That part of it makes sense to me. It's why it changes immediately instead of, it's like, because the plot wouldn't work otherwise is the answer.
Right.
But
you need time to be able to save her.
Yes.
That's what I thought they were going to go down a path where, like, she got kidnapped or something, and then we'd have like a limited amount of time to go out and save her, and they'd have to like race against the clock, and that would explain why she wasn't present there in the present day, because she was kidnapped, like she was already removed from the equation. But then also they'd be able to still rescue her and she wouldn't die in the timeline. But ultimately, yeah, they set her death point at like a week and a half later, so they get plenty of time to be able to catch this guy.
Yeah, and that obviously sets up what the entire plot is going to be for the back half of the movie. So, and it's you know what's so funny is we skipped over most of the first half to start talking about all this meteor stuff, and I'm thinking back to that first half now and going, is there much I actually want to talk about in that first half? Because there isn't a ton.
Yeah, no, not really. It's literally just Jim Caviezel is super emo over everything that's happened. His life is not what he hoped it would be.
His girlfriend's dumped him because he's too emotionally distant ever since his dad died when he was 6. So he's got that trauma to deal with.
Yeah. And then, he still visits his mom, who is still alive, and she's caring about him and all that stuff. And then you get the bit where they go and open up the old trunk. Michael Cera specifically goes and open up the old trunk, and they pull out the ham radio, and they're like, hey, wonder if this still works. And because of the Northern Lights, they're able to speak. Well, it's specifically when Jim Caviezel's alone, but he's able to speak to his father in the past. They quickly come to the realization of, wait a minute, you're my dad. And then the rest of the plot kicks off from there.
Yeah. And the dad doesn't believe it at first. He's like, basically, he doesn't believe it until he's in the situation where he's going to die. And he kind of, because obviously he's like, wait, how did you know those baseball results? But it's too big to believe you're my son in the future. It's too big to believe that I'm going to die. These are two big things. But when it actually plays out and it ends up saving his life, he's like, oh, you are my son. You're an angel from the heavens. You saved my life. Blah, blah, blah.
I actually really appreciated that scene where they just cut it into montage to show that they just basically stayed up talking all night, and it's just the son. And like I said, he breaks every rule of time travel, where he's like, let me tell you everything about the future. Like, I'm not going to hold back on it. You want to know sports results? I got an almanac right here, and I'm going to read you off every page.
Yeah. Or the scene where in the past, his best friend Gordy as a child asked to talk to the radio, and Jim Caviezel says, remember the word Yahoo, which this is actually quite funny in hindsight because Yahoo got its ass kicked by Google, but still, I just imagine Jim Caviezel saying, like, remember the word Yahoo, and then we see in the future, as the movie progresses, he's riding high, he's got tons of money, and then Google shows up, and all of a sudden he's destitute, he's got nothing. Do you know what's so funny is that there's definitely a movie that's maybe around this time period or maybe a bit older that I remember there being like a time travel joke about investing in IBM and how dated that sounds now, but it would have made sense to say that at the time. So I thought that was funny. This is what it made me think of. But I can't remember for the life of me what movie that was.
I think the modern equivalent, if you're going to try anything that's like time travel back previously than 10 years up to now, is Bitcoin. That's got to be the big one that would just set it as the modern day equivalent.
Yeah, sure. or I don't know what else became really successful. I don't know, invest in, I don't know,
Toilet paper, if it's before
Toilet
2020.
anyway, regardless, the like, so yeah, the first half, like it's perfectly fine. It it does what it's supposed to do.
It's mostly just exposition more than anything else.
But it's also like having to like have the characters figure all this stuff out. And I get it, it's more satisfying if the moments feel real and grounded. But it's just enough of a Hollywood sheen on everything that I never really quite felt feel raw or visceral. It always felt like it was through this lens of Tinseltown.
I was actually feeling very positive on it in terms of tone right up until the moment of the choice. And then again, that's where we get this strange blurry montage of like the new timeline shifting in. But it felt, especially because all of this is happening as Dennis Quaid is saving a little girl and sliding down like a construction chute in this warehouse. And it's just filmed so over the top in a lot of ways that it has, like you said, that Hollywood sheen, that it immediately was just like, all right, well, this is just kind of dumb now, isn't it?
Yeah, and then once the killer thing's set up, it's like, okay, well, that's the plot. We have to save Mum. We have to do that because Caviezel even has it's like the timeline's changing while he's asleep, so he's having like nightmares of like going to her funeral and like all the new memories that are coming in, and now he's lost a parent, and obviously Dennis Quaid doesn't like hearing that his wife's going to die in a week. So,
which, okay, I guess give me a little bit more rope here to hang myself is the fact that he wakes up after his mom has died. And it takes him like until he sees her file to realize, oh wait, no, that actually she died. Like he doesn't have a memory of that. He's just like, oh no, I thought it was a dream.
Yeah, last time he suddenly had maybe the idea is that because there's now 3 timelines that he's supposed to have lived through, his brain just can't handle any more of them. So he's just
strangely enough, that's the plot of Butterfly Effect. That's literally what happens in that movie.
I don't remember a goddamn thing about that movie.
Yeah. But it's just too many timelines and your brain starts like hemorrhaging.
But yeah, so because he goes to the police station and he's trying to like figure out things about whatever, because he's the one investigating this body they found, and he gets the crime photos and all that. And just out of nowhere, Braugher's character says, "Hey, like, that makes it 10 victims because this is his earliest one. Which means he probably knew her." And he's like, "Wait, 10? This case only has 3 victims." And he's like, what are you talking about? You've looked through these case files like dozens and dozens of times.
More than anyone else for a very obvious reason.
Yeah. And then he looks through it and then, his mum's there and that's like the big reveal. So, yeah. Yeah, it's like, I think, I mean, once it sets it up, it's like, okay, there's a clear goal in mind now. And it's kind of interesting that, it's funny that I brought up Inner Space for Dennis Quaid, because I think in a weird way there's a bit of an Inner Space quality. It's not funny, obviously, but in the sense that Dennis Quaid kind of has to act like a cop now in the past, and he only has his son on the radio to kind of like tell him what to do and how to like try and, because basically the gist comes is like, okay, what can we do to stop this? And it's like, you never found out who he was or where he would be. He's like, well, no, but we know when he killed people roughly, so you can go to those locations and like catch him in the act. And of course, immediately as soon as he said that, I was like, gee, it's going to start looking suspicious if Dennis Quaid's hanging about all these places where all these women end up being murdered.
Yeah, what a shock. I mean, in fairness, the plan is don't let the women get murdered. So it wouldn't matter if he looks suspicious at these random locations where women aren't murdered.
True.
But he kind of screws that up.
Until he fails and one gets murdered, and all of a sudden he's in the shit. But so because he does a whole thing where it's like, okay, so this next victim, which is like the next day, is this nurse. She's at this bar this time. And Dennis Quaid goes and he's just trying to observe, and we see the killer because we saw him at the hospital, so we know what he looks like. And he's sort of eyeing places up, and then out of nowhere, the nurse that he's kind of like keeping an eye on has clearly noticed him looking, because she's decided to buy him a drink and ask him over. And her and her 2 friends even say, "Oh, you're a married firefighter. Oh, what the hell? Let's flirt anyway." And to be fair to him, I don't, there's no indication that he does anything out of line or whatever. He just keeps an eye on her because he's trying to not let her die. Which actually, if there's one thing I want to give this movie credit for, right, I'll give it one thing that I liked is that when Jim Caviezel presents the problem that the mum is now dead and this killer's going to kill her in a week, Dennis Quaid immediately offers a pretty good solution. He's like, well, I'll just leave. I'll just take the family and just get out of town. And Jim Caviezel says, look, that would solve it for us, but there's like 7 other victims that shouldn't die that are going to. So, so as a last resort, yes, leave. That's fine if it all goes tits up. But until then, we have to be the good guys here. We have to stop them.
On one hand, I do like that. I think it is like a reasonable enough thing of he is a cop, he wants to protect and serve, he's, you know, whatever. But I also think this is kind of in the same line as what we were complaining about Doc in the Back to the Future 3, where it's just kind of random as to what you choose is and is not the timeline anymore. Where it's like, oh, I saved my dad, but we can't let these women die because that wouldn't be right. But like, we can also do this. No, it's just kind of
David, you're thinking about this all wrong. This is nothing. Okay. Nothing here is about fixing or saving a timeline. That is not how they're thinking about this in any way, shape, or form. They're just thinking about this as, okay, my dad died and he's now saved. That is a good thing. These women now die. That is a bad thing. So we just have to stop the bad thing from happening. It's not about which timeline's supposed to exist. They never talk about it in any way in those like Doc Brown terms of this is what the timeline's supposed to be. We have to preserve it no matter if something bad happened in it.
I get that. I understand. It's more so down the line where very, very quickly Jim Caviezel shoots down the idea of, I'm just going to take my wife out of town. And he's come to like, no, you can't do that because it's our responsibility. Because these women are dead now, that's on us. We have to stop them from dying because we are the reason they are dead. And I don't know, it kind of just seemed to me like, okay, we get it, you're a cop, but like this still seems a bit extreme that you wouldn't want, like, tell your mom to still get out of town and then have your dad also do this. Like, you don't need it to be one or the other here.
No, that's a fair point. I do like it though, just from like a making me like root for the characters' perspective, because it actually makes them good people and not just doing it for themselves. So I think on that level, I actually think it's a good choice, regardless of any nitpicks you could have with it. But yeah, I mean, it's very you know, compartmentalized to just that like element of the movie. Like obviously, every other complaint I have is still very much going to come up.
Honestly, I think the only thing I really would have wanted out of it is to flip it. I think I would have wanted Dennis Quaid to be a bit more of, no, just because I'm alive with doesn't mean we can't let these women die, but have Jim Caviezel be like, I was emo before and I just wanted to have a whole family, so let's make that happen, you know? Yeah. I think that's the only thing I would have wanted to flip out of. But everything, yeah, I agree with you that I think it does make them likable characters. I just would have wanted it the other way around.
Well, regardless, that sets up the plan. He goes and he watches, and the murder just doesn't happen because he's sitting with the nurse at the bar all night. The killer just never approaches. He just never tries it. So okay, we saved a woman. That's great, but we didn't actually advance the stopping him for good part of the plot or saving the mum. But sure enough, like as you might expect, though, when he goes to like the next person who was in a bar or whatever, the killer's maybe noticed that this same guy's popped up again and has some issues with that, so attacks him in the bathroom. And not only does he almost kill Dennis Quaid, and he only gets stopped because some guys walk in, he gets his driver's license with his address on it. So now he's got, like, I mean, I thought he was going to use it to go find the wife. He actually plants it on the next crime scene. So all of a sudden, Dennis Quaid, like, I get that he was trying to like see if he could save the woman, but him going to her apartment to see if she was dead and finding the dead body and putting him at the scene of the dead body is the dumbest character decision I may have seen in some time.
There's a reason he's not a cop. There's a reason he's just an honest-to-God firefighter doing the best he can.
Yeah. He rushes into danger. That's his job. He rushes into the fire.
He doesn't think about his own safety or criminal culpability.
Yeah. So yeah, sure enough, when his good friend who's a cop, Satch, played by Andrew Brewer, shows up the next day as a cop, like, hey, we need to talk to you. Like, your license was found at a crime scene.
I need to skip this ever so. We get the one bit where they decide to play with the time travel aspect of it, and they say, "Oh, the guy took your driver's license. That means he touched your wallet.
Yes.
We can do fingerprint analysis." So they do a whole bit where they have Dennis Quaid wrap up his wallet, bury it under some floorboards.
I want to cut in here just quickly.
Yeah.
He says, we could do some fingerprints off your wallet. So you'll take it out, only touch the corners so that you're not messing up any potential prints that the killer left, right, any more than you already have. And he says, wrap it up. And he's like, oh, that's a good idea. I get you, son. Yeah, wrap it up, and then you can use it in the future. I thought it was really weird, though. He didn't open it to take out whatever he had inside it first. Because I'm like, you've probably got a credit card in. Well, maybe it's the 69, maybe not. But, like, money's probably in there. Like, there's probably important things. Of ID. Yeah, there's probably important stuff in there you need to take out. And I guess they just cut over it in the edit because it's not important. But I'm like, that's still kind of weird. Like, just show him emptying it.
Also, this raises a very interesting question on, like, my side of things of when everything settles out at the end, was this wallet always in there? Like, at some point were they like, oh, the timeline's fixed, I can go get my wallet now, and then everything gets thrown into chaos again?
That's that's the weird thing about this, is that when the timeline then changes again after they've done something like this, technically it should never have happened because the timeline was different. We could go nuts thinking about it in those terms. So yes, and they use the fingerprints in present day, and they find out who it is, because there's a whole bit where Caviezel before this was convinced it was some other guy that went to high school with the first victim, and he questions him, and there's really not much to it other than he's like going above and beyond.
Well, there's a secondary bit, we skipped over it, is when we are first pretty much introduced to Caviezel, when they're digging up this other dead body. We see him stopping into this house of some people who had a dead cop's son. And they're like, oh, there's a body out there? Oh, that's crazy. That's horrible. By the way, have you met our son who's not going to be important to the plot at all? And then, wouldn't you know it, it's him because he buried the body close to his own home. So I kind of feel like as soon as they found out this was one of the first bodies, they should have been like, okay, clearly he wouldn't have buried it that far away from where he lived. Let's check the surrounding area.
Well, that's the thing, though. It turns out later it's not his first victim. He changed his MO so that they wouldn't, because he, as a cop, he knows that if a serial killer has like a list of victims, usually the first victim's someone they know and the rest will be strangers.
Right.
So it turns out later on that he killed his own mother.
Yeah.
Because she's a nurse. And Jim Caviezel has a whole thing. But yeah, Jim Caviezel, like, because when the timeline changes again after the mothers died, right, and the killers like changed it by killing a bunch of people, we see the world's a bit colder, and his relationship with Andrew Braugher's a bit worse, because when he comes into the precinct, like Braugher chews him out for being like, a disrespectful sack of shit or something like that. And
yeah, he's just talking to him like a buddy, because they were buddies before this, and he's like, you can disrespect yourself, but don't you ever disrespect me. It's like, oh, jeez, all right, sorry, man, Jesus.
Yeah, not that it ever comes up. Like that's the weird thing about this. I don't feel like it matters to the rest of the movie that we're in a timeline where he's like, he thinks he's a loser, or he thinks he's like a shitty cop, or whatever he thinks. No,
the modern day timeline purely exists to feed information back to the earlier timeline. We don't care really what happens to Jim Caviezel at all until we get to the final scene, and even then, that's up for debate.
Yeah. So yeah, once they get the fingerprints, they notice this guy who is a cop, right? So and everything, whatever our reasons, but. It's like, okay, we know who it is, and he passes that information back, but this is also when his dad's getting arrested in the past for being at a crime scene, and his driver license being at a crime scene, and whatever else. So there's a whole thing where he's yelling at the radio as they're trying to take him away, and but by this point, though, he's told Dennis Quaid, Jack Quaid's his son, Dennis Quaid, like who the killer is. So he's like trying to say to Andrew Braugher, he's like, hey, it's this guy, Jack Shepherd, right? He crash landed on an island, and he became a serial killer. Right?
Just ask my wife. She's very intimately familiar with this man.
Yes. She was in a throuple with him at one point. It was a whole thing.
Yes.
And he tries to convince him. He's like, hey, I've been talking on the radio, and I know it sounds crazy. And then, of course, he's remembered all of the baseball like facts that his son has told him. So he's like, hey, this game that's on right now, this is going to happen. And he gets really specific about this thing where the ball hits a shoe and gets shoe polish on it. And then, the Mets get up and win the game despite the fact that they were down quite badly and whatever inning.
It's literally just that scene from Back to the Future 2, where it's like, oh, they're down by 3. Check this out. And it goes up by 7.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, right. And Andrew Braugher's not buying any of it. He goes to talk to Elizabeth Mitchell, the wife, because she wants to, because again, he's friends with them. So she's like, hey, tell me what's going on here. Why has my husband been taken in? And when he's talking to her, the baseball game's on the TV in the background, and he starts to like hear parts of it, and he's like, wait, son of a bitch. Like, I don't believe it.
Love this sequence from the wife's perspective, because the conversation literally goes like, look, we think your husband might be in trouble for murder, but I need you to be clear with me. Is he talking to your son from the future? And the wife's like, what? And then almost instantly he hears the game change. And then he just gives all of his attention to the World Series while she's sitting there like, is my husband a murderer? Please help me here.
It's wonderful to think about it from her perspective, because it's like he just stopped paying attention to her. He's like, no, this is more important. Right. And all she could possibly think is that he cares more about a baseball game than what's going on in our lives, which is like pretty serious right now. But of course, we know, the audience, that he's like, wait a minute. I think my friend's telling the truth. I think he's talking to his son from the future.
From the audience perspective, it's great, but I just love they keep cutting back to her. And he's like, as soon as something happens in the game that he mentioned in the interrogation cell, he turns to look at her and gives like a smile, like, yeah, huh, this? And she's like, what? What's happening?
I'm a nurse. Do you need medical help? Like, what's happening?
A stroke, sir? What's going on?
So, and as this is playing out, the killer, Jack Shepherd, has come to the precinct to try and kill Dennis Quaid, which I thought that was weird, because I'm like, you planted his driver's license at the murdered victim's body, but why would you do that if you weren't intending on just framing him for the crime? So why try and kill him now? If you're going to go and kill him anyway, then why do that?
All right, I'm actually a little bit on this one, because A, he does know his name, he is saying it, so he is able to like point him out and say, we should look into this guy, and if anybody believes him and starts digging, they might actually be able to find something.
Why would the killer know that at this point now?
Why would the killer know that? Because he's seen his face while they're doing that, and he seems to know a lot about his life, because he said the name of the first victim as well, Mary Fratelli or whatever.
That part, sure, but he, like, the killer wouldn't know that he knows his name, though. I mean, we know that he knows his name, and we know that he's already told Andrew Braugher.
Yeah,
hey.
But clearly he knows a lot more than he should.
Yes.
So that's reason to investigate it all. What I thought the plan was that he was going to get him in this interrogation room and then kill him. And when it comes time to be like, why did you kill him? It's like, oh, I came in here and he jumped at me. Like, he attacked me. It was self-defense.
Yes.
But now he's dead with the knowledge of he was the Nightingale killer, so he's off the hook.
Yeah, except Andrew Braugher, when he hears that Jack Shepherd, the man that Dennis Quaid said was the killer, went to see him and mysteriously he ended up dead, I'm pretty sure he would at least, you know what, I'm going to look into this guy. I'm going to look into Jack Shepherd.
You'd hope so, but he didn't think that far ahead.
Look, I believe in Holt, okay?
Yes, absolutely. Holt could solve this case, no problem. That being said, I do need to bring up, so actually, all the while... Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just... You know how in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, whenever they joke about Holt's past and saying, oh, I had a tough time being like a gay black cop coming up through the force, I'm like, wait, is this movie just like that? Is this just what Holt's past was before he became Captain Holt?
Absolutely. This is where he was working the beat and he was having trouble.
Also, if he was an active police officer in 1969, and then he is like, yeah, he's supposed to basically be the age he was in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, if not a little bit older, in the 1999 part. If this joke were panning out, then he would be, obviously he's not alive anymore, but that would mean that in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the character would probably be about 110 or something stupid like that.
Yeah, close to. I feel like he's a little bit younger than Dennis Quaid there, but yeah, pretty close.
Well, yeah, but I'm just like, he's already an active cop, so he has to be at least his late 20s in 1969, right? Add on 30, so he's maybe pushing 60, maybe in his early 60s, and then you add on another 30 years. And
he's 90.
Yeah, he's like 90.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I need to bring this up because it's simultaneously very smart of the movie and yet also felt completely out of nowhere, and that is how he takes care of Jack Shepherd.
Also, I want to point out here, actually, this is the big chunk of the movie where you just don't see Jim Caviezel for like half an hour.
Yeah. Well, it's because when Dennis Quaid's getting arrested, he knocks over the ham radio.
That's right.
And therefore, all the transistors go bust, and he's no longer able to communicate.
I still think a smarter script would have had something for that side of the timeline to do.
Oh, yeah. No, have it be he doesn't knock over the radio. He keeps calling over the line, and he eventually talks to Elizabeth Mitchell. And you get a little reveal there.
Or anyone else. The son, like himself, even.
Yeah, self in the past where he can't like mess with the timeline too much, but has to tell him like, hey, remember this up in your room? Go do that.
Or we're like, right, I know this is going to sound weird, little chief. His dad calls him chief, which is why he says that. He's like, little chief. Just, that's going to sound like a weird thing to say, but just in about 10 years, right, where you're deciding whether or not to go out with that girl, and you decide to not do it, I just want you to know that she was going to have sex, so just go, okay? Just remember this.
I was looking at the opposite side of that, where it's like, now, if you're thinking 15 years from now, it's not worth it to buy condoms, do it.
Well, it was funny, though, the timeline at the end, he seems to have a kid all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing, so, like, it felt like his, like, troubled relationship at the start was going to be a much bigger deal in this movie, because the start his character with the girlfriend leaving and saying that he's emotionally, like, distant or whatever, and he's, like, drinking and smoking, and he can't deal with it, right? It doesn't come up again, really, until after the timeline is changed twice, I think. And
it's when the mom dies.
Yeah. And he goes to the library to speak to her, and he basically says, hey, like, I need to talk to you. And he calls her by name, and she's just like, who are you? How do you know my name? And he's like, and she's like, wait, no, I think I do know you maybe. Like, are you like, because from the breadcrumbs you get, it seems like this is a woman that his friend, the neighbor, and his wife know, and they introduced
mutual
them.
Friends with no Emmerich.
Yeah. So, but she's like, wait, so how do you, and he sort of realizes finally, like, the gears turn in his head, and he's like, oh, I understand what's happening here. Sorry, we don't know each other. Sorry to scare you. Bye. And he just kind of leaves, right?
I kind of wish they would have played that for a joke moment, though, where he's like, you're double parked, and just walks out.
Yeah. But at the end of the movie, when the timeline's changed for the final time, he seems to be married to her now and has a child. And that's like a whole thing. So this is the thing where by the end of the movie, he suddenly has a kid where he didn't the rest of it.
Yeah, it's happy ending.
It's a very, very schmaltzy happy ending, if you ask me.
Oh, absolutely. So we get the bit where everyone's watching the World Series. Andre Braugher's out talking to the wife, and he's just left Dennis Quaid in the interrogation room.
And he MacGyver's a plan.
Yes. So Jack Shepard's plan here, viewing only a control panel and an AC unit.
Dennis Quaid, not Jack Shepard.
Sorry, yes, Dennis Quaid. Is that when Jack Shepard enters the room, he's got a bunch of gasoline or some other flammable, it may just be water even.
I think it's just water. I think it's just to electrocute him, so it's just water.
Yeah, down at Jack Shepard's feet, and then he uses the electrical cable from the AC unit. He strips the wires, and the moment this guy steps in, he tosses the wires into the puddle, causing this massive short that electrocutes him and knocks him out. And all I could think in this moment is, for a firefighter, I can understand it. I mean, it's setting up an electrical fire. From the viewpoint of this movie, when has he ever been this capable?
And then he uses an aerosol can to do a little flamethrower to get the sprinklers going. And I'm like, how much shit is in this interrogation room that he's been left in? There's a lot of doohickeys for him to use.
I mean, hey man, as long as you deadbolt the door, it's not like anybody could do anything in there.
Well, it wasn't quite a deadly trap, but he came up with a pretty dangerous trap for someone walking through the door.
He probably could have killed him if he wanted to. But instead, he decides to take his driver's license this time and go to his address to try to look for clues, because that's the last thing that Jim Caviezel said was, he probably has bits of jewelry or whatever from all of his
trophies.
victims.
You'll have trophies, Dexter style, which makes sense. Although Jim Caviezel wasn't suggesting that he go himself and investigate. It was more just, if you put them on the scent of him, they'll go and search his place and they'll find evidence that'll prove that it's him and yada yada. And that was perfectly fine. And so here's the thing. I was like, this chase here, right? Because once Jack Shepard gets back to his apartment, and he's sensing, oh, maybe he's here. He they end up in a chase. He's shooting at him. They go out the fire escape. They're going through the alleys, and at this point as well, Braugher's character showing up with some other cops, and they're like hot on the tail of everything. And it's this big chase that ends up, and it's such a predictable element where at the end of this, when it appears the killer might have died by going into the water and drowning. And like Dennis Quaid's now off the hook because they found all this evidence in this guy's place. You know that this is the false ending. You know that there's going to be like another, not act, but like another, another chunk, another like thing where they think everything's okay, but then the killer shows up because he's not actually dead. And that frustrated me so much here because I was so ready for this to be over at that
Yeah.
point. Like, I was ready for this to be the climax, and I'm like, I know you're not the climax. I know you're about to do Dennis Quaid goes home, we're all happy family, everything's fine and fixed. And then, nope, here he is.
Yeah, it did feel extra tacked on for seemingly no reason. I want to say that it's just because, like, we specifically made it this. Honestly, it's to have the little twist. That's the only reason they included it here. It's to have the twist of the reason we haven't been following Jim Caviezel is because we don't want you to know the timeline didn't change for him.
Yeah, and the twist is a bit generous, to be honest. Because this is the thing, like during the montage in the middle where they're getting to know each other after Dennis Quaid believes the whole time travel element. Like, there's a bit in the middle of that montage where they're clearly talking about the fact that he dies of lung cancer, and he doesn't want to believe it. He says, "Oh, he's telling my wife, telling me to stop smoking, blah blah blah," and I'm like, yeah, it's very convenient that even in this timeline, there's still a preventable thing that's going to happen to him. It's almost like we're going to end this movie with him finally having decided to quit early enough that he's still alive in the present day. So we get a whole thing where the killer comes to the house, in both timelines, in fact. He shows up at the house in 1969 and wants to, kill everyone, basically. Although, seemingly, he was never going to kill the son because the son is still alive in present day.
But again, would it have happened unless he did it and then simultaneously it would have shifted in both timelines?
The timeline changed for the wife dying very early compared to when she actually was going to die, so...
Right. But clearly there still has to be this threat that, like, it actually would impact things, or else we know it doesn't impact anything.
Yes. An old killer, because there was one scene with the killer in present day when Jim Caviezel figures out who it is. He goes to see him and basically says, "Hey, dipshit, it's over. And it was over 30 years ago, and you've just not realized it yet." And it was like, okay, that's kind of like a badass little threat, given the context of what's happening. But
that is enough where modern day killers like, well, screw this guy. I don't know what he's got on me, but I'm going to go hunt him down and figure it out.
It feels like there's a missing beat here where the killer should be like, "Hey, you're in the same house I came to kill these other people 30 years ago. This is very strange." But yeah.
It seems like there should be a bit more of a vendetta thing going on of, like, it's Johnny, right? He's like, little Johnny, I seen you once before, 30 years ago.
Yeah, so I mean, I think they do one thing where he says his name kind of like that to imply that he has realized this is the kid of, like, someone he killed, but it's a very small, and it doesn't really matter that much. Like, it never really feeds into any of the conflict that happens after that point.
Yeah.
But there's a whole thing here where Dennis Quaid gets hit and then handcuffed, and then MacGyver's his way out of that. There's a lot of MacGyvering from him in the back half of this movie, I'm realizing.
Yeah, he's very handy.
But he gets a shotgun that he's got in the house, which they did set up earlier because it was in the fire department trunk. That was
Michael Cera almost took it, which would have been a problem for everybody.
6-year-old Michael Cera almost started, taking fools out, busting some caps. But yeah, so there's a whole thing here where I even had like a little nitpick with something that plays out here. So the killer goes upstairs and he lies down next to Elizabeth Mitchell, and she doesn't realize it immediately, but very quickly he's like, "Wait a minute, you're not my husband." And he gets on top of her, and it's all very threatening and menacing. And then little Johnny, young Jim Caviezel, as a 6-year-old, comes in and sees this. And he's like, "Mom," and like she scratches at the killer's face. We see the scratch appear on the old version of the killer's face.
Yep.
Whole thing. What bothered me is that clearly this led to the killer chasing the kid or whatever, right? Because the next time we see him, Dennis Quaid's got his shotgun, but the killer grabs the kid version of Johnny as a shield and says, "Hey, I'm going to snap his neck if you don't drop that gun." And of course, eventually, what sort of solves all this is that Elizabeth Mitchell comes flying down the stairs to protect her son.
She's like a screaming howler monkey, just suddenly off screen from like top left, just pounces on this guy.
Right, and that breaks them up. So Dennis Quaid, well, it doesn't quite kill him, obviously, but like he ends up shooting his hand off, which again is probably the big effect moment of the ending, because the future version of the killer's hand kind of like disintegrates and does weird shit.
He seems to be aware of the fact that this is changing. Like, he seems to be aware that there was a previous time where he had his hand, and all of a sudden now he does not.
Maybe it's just a case of, like, it depends how much it directly affects you, because this directly affects him a great deal.
I'm going to go ahead and say being a billionaire through Yahoo probably directly affects Gordo, but he doesn't seem to care.
He's forgotten that poor timeline that he didn't want to be a part of.
Which actually reminds me, do we see Michael Cera in that timeline? Because I like to think no. I like to think that that's only the poor timeline.
I think we might at the end of the baseball game when they're all hanging out. The thing I didn't like, though, is what I was getting at, is that I'm not really sure why she's not dead. Like, why didn't he just quickly kill her before he came down? Unless he, like, heard, Quaid getting up, or, he's like, oh, shit, he's gotten away from his restraints, and he had to go down and deal with that. I'm not entirely sure why he just left her lying there. With I don't know. It just that felt weird to me.
I don't think there's really a reason. I think it's meant to be implied that he's giving chase to Johnny, but you're right. It would make so much more sense to just finish the job.
Yeah, or at the very least restrain her as well, but or knock her out or something. But he just apparently left her so that she could come down and do this. Like,
well, I think there is a moment where she's implied to be knocked out. Because she, as he's looking at Johnny on the door, she's lying completely motionless. So I think she was implied to be knocked out. But yeah, she's up again in like 20 seconds. So clearly couldn't have been that much.
Yeah, it just feels a little bit of a hodgepodge. And of course, there's a lot of fighting for guns in both timelines and whatnot. And the big moment here, the big thing that they clearly wanted to do, that they had such a hard on for, that they had everything built up to it so they could do this moment.
Yeah.
Is that in the past, the killer does get away with his hand shot off, right? And, Quaid doesn't quite get that final shot off to kill him. And he's like taking care of the wife and kid. And he's like, okay, you okay? Right? And it's worth mentioning that before all this stuff started happening, Dennis Quaid fixed the radio. So the radio's like just sort of on, and you can kind of hear both ways, like there's chaos happening. Yeah. Right? And the big moment they have is that Jim Caviezel's been struggling with the killer in the present day for his gun. He's almost, the killer gets to the gun. He's about to kill Jim Caviezel. He's holding it to his neck or whatever. And bang! And you see it's from a shotgun. And then the camera reveals that this is old Dennis Quaid, who's now alive in this timeline.
Because the moment he lost his hand, we see the entire living room shift. So this is new timeline where everyone lives.
New timeline where everyone lives. It's Dennis Quaid. And it feeds in, like, and again, it's such a cheesy Hollywood script, but like one of the things they did early on was that he's trying to teach young Johnny to ride a bike, and he's getting frustrated because Johnny's like scared of it and falling over and whatnot.
I missed this bit. I missed it.
What do you mean you missed it? You didn't see it?
You're explaining it now. I didn't put the two together, but now that you're saying it, like
right. And then later, and the wife is like, "Hey, he just needs to know you're always going to have his back. You just have to be there for him." And then he tries to teach him. Once he's like saved his own life, he's like, "Hey, kid, let's go back out there. I'm always going to be here for you. I'm always going to watch your back. I'm never going to go anywhere." And then here at the end, he's like, "No, I've got your back, son. I'm here. Yeah. I'm still here. Damn it. I beat cancer." Also
echoing what he wrote on the desk, because he wrote, "I'm still here" after he was alive, and then he's saying to him here, like, "I'm still here, Chief." So
yeah. So they wanted this moment. They wanted this big reveal that he's still alive in the present day, but it's the most predictable thing ever that they were going to do this. So I'm not that excited about it. And honestly, the logistics of a lot of this is so weird. Like, why would the killer in present day still come here with how much everything has changed after like how spectacularly he failed to kill this family and got his hand blown off? Like, I get that he would still want some modicum of revenge, but it doesn't feel like the context of why he's there or how he's there is different. It just feels like I don't know.
There's this weird new timeline now that has to exist where everyone knows this guy did it. This guy had his hand blown off, and yet somehow he's still allowed to just roam about for 30 years and then happens to show up on this very night to attack Jim Caviezel. Like, it feels like half of the timeline changed, but then what we needed for this moment to happen had to stay in place.
Yeah, I think it really falls down on terms of its science fiction elements. Well, there's obviously some cool ideas in here. There's just stuff like this where it feels like, no, you didn't care about actually thinking about how any of this works. You just wanted to have this emotional moment. where they hug together, and we see old age makeup, Dennis Quaid, and then we're going to end the movie, other than like a montage of like family memories of like the timeline. We get like a baseball game where Jim Caviezel's playing baseball again with his family because it's something he gave up originally because he was so sad about his dad.
They had a whole thing where, like, okay, this is another bit of this movie that was strange to me, is that during the bit where they do the montage and say, hey, tell me about your life, he has to tell Dennis Quaid about his new life that just happened in this new timeline. The ones that he just got the new memories for. So, like, they're saying all the stuff of, like, oh, yeah, you got this Mustang when you, like, they're talking about Dennis Quaid. Like, oh, yeah, you got a Mustang and you loved it. And he's like, I don't have a Mustang. He's like, well, you will. So this is all new memories for him. And it's kind of like they're both just discovering this as it's going on. But then they also throw in this bit of saying how he loved playing baseball. But then in senior year, he threw his arm out and therefore he wasn't able to go pro. And that's, like, kind of implied that that was fixed in this timeline. Yet simultaneously, he's also still a cop. And it's just like I didn't have a connection to this version of the character because this one only existed for the very brief period of your dad is alive, but before your mom is dead.
Yes.
That's the only period where he's there.
There's a very specific version of the timeline where he still seemed to go down the exact same paths and he still seems to be lonely and not have a girlfriend. Even though the implication is that that was all because he was sad and had like trauma because of his dad dying at a young age, and that's not the case anymore. So I mean, yeah, his dad did eventually die, but he died 20 years later, so he would have been an adult, so it wouldn't have been as traumatic. And it's like, okay, right, so why isn't he more different? Why isn't Jim Caviezel's character more different after his dad survived? Now I get that after the mum dies and the timeline changes again, I would get that technically, like, that trauma might have like put him down a similar path to the what he had originally, and that could be something they could argue. But yeah, in that in between, when technically the dad was meant to be alive for an extra 20 years, it's like, why is Jim Caviezel the exact same guy?
Right.
But at the end of the movie,
that seems to be the point where we find out everything about his life there.
Yeah. But at the end of the movie, when we change the timeline for the final time, his life has changed completely. He's got a wife. He's got a son. Everything is altered. But every other timeline change didn't change a damn thing about who he is, except the fact that Andre Braugher didn't like him that much in that one timeline.
Which, to be fair, that is the worst possible timeline to have Andre Braugher not like you.
Oh dear. So, yeah, all of this is kind of annoying. As someone who likes time travel stories, someone who likes science fiction, all of the interesting, juicy parts feel like they're just glossed over because they wanted to do the sentimental Hollywood bullshit. The final shot of this movie is like a blurry flashback of Dennis Quaid riding on his motorbike with his young son in his lap, and that's like the happy moment the movie goes out on. And I'm like, I didn't want a sentimental ending to this.
Yeah, no, you're right. And again, this is where that like weird, I would even call it, it's like a ballad. I was almost gonna say gospel song, but like it's almost like gospel, a ballad starts playing, and it's just so out of place with everything else that we've had in this movie, but it makes it just all in on the sappy. It's the most Hollywood sappy ending ever constructed after a movie like this.
Yeah, so I think it falls into the pits of just, I don't know, it's just such a generic. I mean, the concept's not generic, but the way it handles everything is so generic, and it feels very, very Hollywoodized in a way that I think makes a lot of it, for me, very unappealing by the end. And I don't think it nailed a lot of the things that it could have done, and ultimately, like, I mean, the movie, to be honest, other than people who have some nostalgia for it because they watched it on cable back in the day, I don't think it's one that's talked about that much. Like, I don't like. I
always see it on lists of time travel movies, but it's only in that context. Yeah, it's only in the context of time travel.
When the TV show came out, I think that's the first time I heard of the movie. Like, that was like me discovering it even existed. So I don't think it has like stood any kind of test of time as a movie in the zeitgeist, or even just, zeitgeist even feels like a harsh word. Even just in the sense of like movie, like pop culture, it doesn't feel like it's sort of lasted in that respect. In the same way that other things from like the year 2000 have, like Pitch Black, Riddick's still a thing. People still think of like that character, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Like even Butterfly Effect, like I don't remember it, and I remember it being shit from what I recall, but even that, I feel like people remember the title, The Butterfly Effect, and bring up that it exists.
It's ever so slightly later, but you know what movie is basically, I think, a better version of this and is almost beat for beat the same? Deja Vu.
Okay. It's better. It's not a great movie, but it's better.
Yeah, I think that movie kind of hits the tone that this movie was looking for. Obviously, it's a little bit different. Like, you know, it's not 30 years in the past. We don't have a father-son bonding thing, but I think it's kind of what people would be expecting out of this type of movie.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, well. Scene of the movie, David.
Oh, God, I was trying to think about this as it was going on. I feel like it has to be pretty early on. I do like a bit of, like, the serial killer plot does seem to be the most interesting stuff that happens, but ultimately I can't really point to any one scene and say that was really good or that was really well done. It's just kind of the concept of it that I like a lot more.
Also, I think if the killer had just been more of a presence where I you know, like I never felt like he was a like it needed like, not to like throw Sean Doyle under the bus here, because I think the character's underwritten. I think it's the first complaint I would say. But I think if this was like a crazier actor who had like a really imposing kind of presence, it might have went a long way to sell that he was a threat, to sell that he was a bad guy.
Right. I feel like he kind of has that in the modern timeline, but it's because he's back. He's got, like, I don't want to call it hippie hair, but he's got a lot longer hair. It's a lot less menacing to me. But no, if we're talking about scene of the movie, I think what I'm probably going to give it to is the sequence after he tells his dad everything that's going to happen about his death, and then you see Dennis Quaid notice it. Like, he's watching the game from afar, and he's just like, okay, the Mets game is playing out the way that they're talking about it, and this call for the fire went in, and you just see this look on Dennis Quaid's face of, I'm about to go face my death. And I know it's coming. And I also know that there might be a way to avert it. And I think that's probably the most intrigued I really was throughout the entire stuff. But even then, once they get into the fire and he has to make that choice, it gets into that weird, blurry, like, timeline shifting stuff. And I think that that's where the praises basically ended there.
Yeah, I don't know what you picked for this, to be honest, because I don't think I ever completely got on board. Like, I always felt like a little bit of a distance to the movie just because of the tone that it had and the way it was presenting its ideas. So for me, I think for funny reasons almost, I have to go where Andre Braugher starts paying attention to the baseball game and Elizabeth Mitchell's just like, what the hell? Why are you not paying attention to me anymore? Because I especially like, thinking about it now, and the new timeline that's been created because everything worked out. Like, I just love the idea that every so often Quaid and Braugher are like, hey, remember that time we solved a murder because you were getting messages from your son from the future? But now we're in a future where that doesn't happen anymore? That it was wild, didn't it?
And yet, it also does, because clearly none of this could have happened unless he did talk to his son from the future. So he did to some extent. It's a whole mess of timeline shenanigans.
Yeah.
I do like the idea that they look at young Johnny every once in a while and say, like, you're going to be a cop. We know you're going to be a cop. We know exactly what way that goes.
Yeah. All right. MVP of the movie.
Oddly enough, I'm debating between two characters, and one of them is not Jim Caviezel. Honestly, for me, it's coming down between Dennis Quaid and Andre Braugher. And I don't think Braugher even really has that much to do in the movie, but I just...
Do you know what it is? It's because he's a good actor, right? And those reactions to him sort of realizing, oh, he might be telling the truth, are genuinely a good performance on his face.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. That's the scene I'm picturing in my head of, like, this is a quality acting moment, especially when he's talking to the wife. He's like, he says that you were talking to Johnny, and she's like, yes, Johnny. And she's like, you spoke to him? It's like, yeah, Johnny, his friend. It's like, no, your son. It's like, I didn't say it was my son. And you just see him, like, getting exasperated, like, God damn it, this is such a pain in the ass.
Oh, dear.
Honestly, yeah, I think I'm going to give it to Braugher. As much as Dennis Quaid does pull his weight in this movie, I don't think that he really delivers a bad performance here. ultimately the script just wasn't there to back him up, and the schmaltziness and sappiness of it by the end just kind of makes me dislike a lot of what he was doing.
That's the problem with the main two characters, is that the schmaltziness of everything makes me less interested in them. And Andre Braugher is kind of like he's like a lightning rod in this movie, where he's the straight man, and when he believes it, it's actually a big deal, because it's like, oh, like, you know, because he's not been caught up in the emotion of it. It's
right.
Yeah. So yeah, honestly, I think I agree. It's either that or 10-year-old Michael Cera. So
for the 3 minutes of screen time where he just grabs a shotgun and says, "Cool."
All right, do your category ratings.
Okay, so starting with the visuals on this one, I think I'm so split on the visuals, because I think that there are sections of this that work really well, but I think anytime they stretch outside the boundaries of like, okay, let's try something new, it really doesn't work for me. So I think by that logic, I kind of got to dock at some points of it does well with the standard stuff, but it's as soon as it tries something new where I'm like, ooh, nah, that didn't work. So I'm going to give that like a 6 outwardly. Sound, it didn't really do anything big with the sound. If we're counting the soundtrack, I'd actively dock it, because like it's just hot trash. Yeah, no, everything's pretty straightforward in terms of that, so I'll just give that a blanket 6 as well. Acting, this is where it gets a little bit more heavy on me. Again, I don't think anyone did a bad performance. I think it's just the script itself was lacking. So since we have a separate section for that, I think acting I am going to give a little bump to. I'm probably going to put that at I'd say 7. I don't think it quite gets up to a 7.5 for me. That's just a bit too close to great territory, but it is good. It is solid acting throughout. Script is where it does fall apart. Script is a great concept that just couldn't deliver on the sci-fi premise that it was building up to. So ultimately for script, I think I got to drop that all the way down to like 4. Like, and that for the 4 is all concept. Everything after that is just kind of like, oh, you didn't quite work it out there. And then production values, this is really going to come down to like the timeline shifting and the way they represent that sort of stuff. And again, I think that it reeks of that 2000s era of CGI just got cheap enough where we can do whatever we want, but we don't think about whether or not it looks good. And like they've got this weird glimmer effect for when things actually change on camera, except for his hand, which just melts like Indiana Jones. So it's a strange mismatch, but I do think special effects are kind of lacking in this overall. So I think I'm probably just going to give that like a 5.5. It's still barely above the middle mark, but only barely.
Yeah, visuals for me are kind of complicated in a sense, because I think it looks kind of okay, but also pretty generic. Like, it really looks like a thriller from this time period, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, depending on what I'm talking about, I might be quite positive if something looks of its era, but it definitely has that kind of look to it. I think for me, you know, one of the things we talk about with visuals is that it's not just cinematography, it's also the editing. And I do think that the editing style is where it bothers me more. I think that's what makes me think it feels of that era. Not so much like the palette or the framing and how it covers the scenes, more the way that it does a lot of cuts and it does a lot of quick things, especially when it starts doing the flashing in of like the little flashback moments of the timelines and whatnot. I think a lot of the visual language feels very, just generic in a way that I just, like, it's not bad. Like, it looks like a movie. It does look like a movie and not something that is like a made for TV or made for video or anything like that. But ultimately, I think 6 is probably right. I think it's okay. It's fine. Like, it breaks past the serviceable, and that's about it. Audio, honestly, I guess I have a more prominent complaint here, in that I actually found myself sometimes struggling to always hear the dialogue over the rest of the sound mix. Now, that could just be specifically the sound mix that's on the home video version rather than anything else, but I did find myself occasionally just like, you know, and admittedly, sometimes I don't think the conversations that I was missing parts of mattered, but like at the start of the movie, for example, when you hear the radio in the truck and it's like you get the little mention of the Nightingale killer, Like, I only made out part of that, and there was definitely some stuff in the radio that I did not hear properly. It felt like it was a little bit down in the mix. Now, that's not a huge deal, because I heard the important parts, so I guess maybe they just thought, oh, it doesn't really matter if this other stuff is heard properly, because it's not the stuff. But if you're trying to focus in on it, because you think there's going to be something important, and you feel like you can't quite get it, like, it's a little disorientating.
There was one bit that we didn't bring up where in both timelines, as this Aurora Borealis is happening, there's a scientist on TV who's like talking about it, and it's just literally the justification of, oh, magic stuff could happen at this point. I didn't make out any of what he was saying, but ultimately it's all just made up stuff anyway. Yeah,
so I mean, I'm not going to like go super low, but I also don't have anything. So I mean, the like, you know, the funny thing is with sound, I don't necessarily consider the final sound mix to be what I'm talking about, because I was going to say, oh, the bass and the 5.1 is quite good, but I'm not really specifically talking about with the sound. I'm talking about music. I'm talking about sound mixing in terms of just the movie as a whole and stuff like that.
Like Tenet would get a 2. That's right.
Well, Tenet has a good score at least, so it'd have some things drag it up. But yeah, the sound mixing from an understanding the dialogue perspective would definitely be getting some harsh deductions. I'll give the sound a 5 in this, because I didn't really like the music, and I had some problems with some of the dialogue sometimes being a little bit in the lower mumbled side.
Right.
For script/story, you know, that absolutely this is the biggest falter of the whole thing. I was also thinking somewhere in the range of a 4, because you've got good concepts and you just do nothing great with them. You go for the cheesiest possible outcomes to everything, and the big moment that you were determined to build to for that final scene, and you had things not make sense to justify it. I don't even think the moment's that good. It's not like I went, oh, I understand why you stuck to your guns on this. No, I actively think that you built to a moment that I don't like, and you ruined other things to get to that moment. So, yeah, 4 out of 10. I think it's completely fair for that. And then production value.
You skipped acting, but yeah.
Okay, I'll do acting first. Yeah, acting. Acting's fine. There's people in this that I know are good. Jim Caviezel isn't, you know, he's probably one of the weaker actors in the movie in a lot of ways. Like, I like him in Person of Interest, and he plays like a sort of stoic badass in that, and stoic badass is perfect for him, because he's not like the most, but in this, he's doing the New York accent, and he's trying to do the tortured souls, like, oh, my daddy died when I was young, so I'm kind of messed up and whatnot. I don't think that quite nails things. I think some of the smaller roles have good actors who do what they can with the roles, but there's not much meat to a lot of them. Certain characters, I thought the best friend / neighbor, played by Noah Emmerich, I thought he was going to be like not a huge deal, but I thought he was going to be more important than what he was.
Yeah, I thought he was going to play the like guy who keeps trying to convince him you're going crazy, or like you're having an emotional breakdown or something, rather than just, oh, that's neat. I wonder
if we did have a lot of that, and the scenes just got deleted. They just cut them all out. Because it feels like he was set up for more, and it just got forgotten about past a certain point.
He needs to be the guy who sits down the main character and says, look, I know that you're thinking things are weird right now, but Truman, I'm your best friend.
So I'm going to go with like a 6 for acting, I think, overall. I don't think I can go up to, and again, it's not necessarily a complaint with the actors themselves, it's also, you know, the direction of the actors, it's the characters as a whole. And then production value is pretty solid overall, because I mean, and I'm not even thinking the effects, because the effects here aren't like that, like, you know, they're not that frequent, no pun intended. Because ultimately it's just the odd timeline change. You've got a little bit of shitty fire at the start. You've got the weird hand melting away effect at the end. But in terms of production value, you do have, like, you know, you have like the entire set piece where he's in the warehouse and it's on fire, and there's a lot of practical fire effects. There's running through a burning building, going down this chute into the water. This stuff is production value. It all costs a lot of money. Period piece wise, I would say they don't go far enough with it, but you know, I don't. It doesn't feel like they're not going far enough out of like cheapness though. Bizarrely, it just kind of feels like they're not interested in doing it. is the vibe I got.
But I would still count that as a point against if they're not interested in setting up a period. Like, could you imagine Back to the Future if they're like, yeah, but like you get it's 50s. We don't got to show all the diner and stuff like that.
Yeah. Would that count as production value, or would that count as... Oh, yeah,
Are we building a category 6? Do I need to put in a category 6?
No, that's about a category 6. Cat 6 tornadoes showed up eventually. No, yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird one for me. But production value is perfectly fine. I would maybe go as high as a 6.5. I won't quite say good, but it does feel like a movie made by a studio. It feels like a New Line Cinema movie.
Yeah, I think it feels perfectly fine for its time, but I do think that there's a lot of stuff of the time that feels really cheap.
Sure. All right then. So, what's your final rating, David?
Final rating. I think I did come out of this just disappointed. Again, the premise had a lot of promise there. I think going into the sharp left turn of, okay, now that you're alive, we got to solve murders together. Like, that's where I'm talking about. It seems like it was built to have a TV show. Like, this feels like it is absolutely, hey, we've got a magic thing that allows you to solve crimes from the future. Like, perfectly made for network TV. But as it stands for this movie, it just leaned way too heavily on the Hollywoodization of it, the schmaltziness, this idea, like, you have our character barely show up at all in the third act in terms of Jim Caviezel, and then you make it this big heartfelt reunion moment is like where we're going to end everything, and it kind of feels like that's not where we were building up to. We were building up to something else. What it was, I can't say, but it didn't feel like it was this. So that difference between predictability and natural progression kind of rears its head. All in all, I can't give it the good. I would say it is better than just a 5, but not by a whole lot. So I think I'm ultimately going to come down as probably a 5.5 for me.
Yeah, I think it's a straight 5 for me. I just, there's too many things I dislike about how it's handled, about how the tone, about how it handles certain ideas and sequences, even though the concepts are really good. And it's not like a torturous movie to watch, although I did get annoyed really in the last like 10-15 minutes because I was ready for it to end and they could have ended it there and then they tacked on this extra 15-20 minutes, which only just led to even bigger bullshit things I didn't like between the old Dennis Quaid and the heartfelt baseball game where, oh, we're all one big happy family.
Don't you see? Nora Emmerich got rich off of Yahoo money. Isn't that a good payoff?
So, yeah, I won't say it's a terrible movie, but I will say that it is firmly in that mediocre category for me because of everything it gets wrong. And it's the sort of thing where if the ending had been better, maybe I would have bumped it to like a 5.5 or whatever, but no.
I have to point out, I had to Google this. Yahoo stock reached an all-time low in September of 2001. So the party was not going to last for much longer for poor Gordo there.
Maybe he sold all his stock, though. He sold out while the getting was good.
The all-time high was January 3rd, 2000. So if he got out in that 1-year time span, he's fine.
Good stuff. All right, well that's that's Frequency. Unfortunately, we didn't like it very much, and I am, again, now that we're at the end of this review and we've spoken our minds, I do not understand that IMDb rating. I am flabbergasted at that number. It does not make sense to me. But that's whatever. The difference of opinions and all that. Maybe we're in the minority. We shouldn't be, but maybe we are.
Maybe we're in the bad timeline and everything's just still shifting around us. We're the only ones who are aware.
So, yeah, obviously David's got his homework movie. I'll get to that in a second, but I'll let you know right now that you can support the show and all the other shows that we have at MailFuzz Movies by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and signing up, and you can get some bonus content. Me and David do 2 monthly shows in addition to this and Collector's Cut, which is the other movie podcast we do, where we work for franchises and things like that. Go and check that out if you haven't. But you can get Criterion Cut once a month, which is where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. There's a whole back catalogue of that now as well. It's up to like 25 movies or something like that. And then the other one is Extra Reels, where we review the opposite of that, which is some of the worst things ever made. And that's got a back catalogue of about something like 26 movies at this point.
It's
so
approaching 30. We're up there.
So, yeah, go check out Patreon. But that is that. Like, subscribe, all the usual things people on YouTube tell you. Comment down below. But every week, David goes back to a movie that we did on the show before he joined. And he watches it and he gives some thoughts. So, yes. David, what was this week's homework movie?
Well, we had a couple of new releases, which means that I couldn't do things that were in order. Otherwise, I'd get all confused. So I'm back to Jurassic World. Funny story. I apparently have seen this one before. Oh. I had not seen the original Jurassic World, but I had seen Fallen Kingdom, which I think speaks volumes to the fact that I didn't remember that I saw Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom until about 25 minutes into the movie. And then I'm like, oh, I'm getting major deja vu all of a sudden. I know exactly what's going to happen in this movie.
I'm getting Jurassic World vibes.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just disappointment after disappointment from that point on. It was...
I mean, okay, do you know what? It's not a great movie. It's not even a good movie. I will say, on a schlocky B-movie level, I kind of like the last 40 minutes. I kind of love them round about a mansion with a dinosaur chasing them, with lightning going off. It's stupid, it's cheesy, but I love it.
It kind of strikes me a lot of the complaints I had about Frequency, where for a lot of this movie, it's doing this thing about, we've got to save these dinosaurs from extinction again because there's this debate of like, are they meant to be in this world? Do we have the right to decide that? It's a whole thing. And then all of a sudden it's an 80s slasher film for 40 minutes. Yes, and I'm like, all right.
And I love 80s slasher movies.
No, I get it. It's a shift. And if you didn't like what was happening before, it is absolutely a welcome change. But I do think that at a certain point, it's specifically the moment where the little girl is asleep in her bed, or like pretending to be asleep, and we see an extended sequence of the raptor opening the window and stepping inside. And I'm like, who is this for? What are we doing?
10 out of 10.
Literally a half hour ago, I was watching them do a blood transfusion between a raptor and a T-Rex, and now we're here. What is the tone you're going for, movie? And by the time I hit the end, I didn't have an answer.
Because this is where it's getting to like Resident Evil styles of like, there's a lab under a mansion and they're doing experiments on dinosaurs, and now there's an evil dinosaur running around. Like, I love the shit out of the last 40 minutes of that movie. The first half, whatever. But
yeah. No, the fact that we got like, I don't know, halfway through the movie, there's a point when they're leaving the island and they show a brontosaurus or whatever at the end of the dock as like lava's approaching, and everyone's staring at it all sad, like, oh God, we've just let all of these creatures die out. And I'm like, is that the moral you're really going to try to sell with this movie? Because you got a lot of movie left, and I don't think it's going to be the extinction subplot. And lo and behold, it wasn't. It was all about genetic engineering, because that's what Jurassic World apparently is. It's about the fact of, hey guys, we never actually really put thought into the fact that we actually played God and all the ramifications that would come out of that.
Yeah, if you thought this was bad though, I got bad news for you, David.
You literally said that about this one. You said, like, I can't wait to see what you say about Fallen Kingdom. And then you turn it around
because I kind of loved the last 40 minutes, so I was deeply curious. But Dominion? Holy shit. I don't want to spoil anything, but I could sum up the entirety of how I feel about Dominion with one quote from the original Jurassic Park.
I'm assuming that it's Jeff Goldblum's "You Were So Concerned" with it. You could. Really? Is it the other Jeff Goldblum line of "That's one steaming pile of shit"?
Well, that one does work, but that's not the one I was thinking of.
All right.
No, it's one that's even more oddly specific that actually ties into what the movie kind of does.
All right. Well, you can tell it to me next time, because I'm sure it's going to be in the next like review or two. As it stands for scoring on this, I remember the first time I watched it, I was predicting everything that was going to happen half an hour before it happened. Didn't quite get 80 slasher film. That wasn't on my bingo card, but the rest of it, yeah. So it's a very formulaic movie. It's very predictable. Ultimately, I just didn't get any sort of enjoyment out of it. It's still decently well made, but even then, there's a lot of sequences that just feel kind of cheap in retrospect. So I think overall, I got to come down to like 5.5 for that. It's just, I was so bored for so much of it.
Hope you like locusts.
I don't, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Oh dear. And that one scene in Dominion, it's like a Jason Bourne scene. I don't even know why it was. Anyway.
What are they doing, man? You could literally say anything. You're like, hey, remember the part where Abraham Lincoln, because, you know, we're cloning people now, so Abraham Lincoln's back. And I'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right for Jurassic World.
Dominion was a, oh geez, I'm almost getting shivers thinking about it.
Hold on, please. I just need a confirmation now.
Uh-huh.
Do we ever get human dino hybrids?
Not in Dominion, you don't.
Okay, thank you. Because that's the one point I was hoping that we're not going to cross.
Yeah, no. I mean, we don't know about the new one coming out, maybe.
That's it. Rebirth, that's going to be it.
All right, there you go, everyone. That's the show. That's been the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Thank you very much for joining us. Keep watching the science fiction and computer ad salsa.